RTV6, Indianapolis This Week.
And welcome to Indianapolis This Week. I'm Jason Fechner. Some major developments in the Circle City this week to delve into, but we begin today's conversation with the president launching airstrikes overseas.
I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched.
Late Thursday, the U.S. military launched its first military operation under President Trump, a series of airstrikes against the Syrian regime. The president said he ordered the attack in response to the Assad regime's chemical weapons attack on Syria's own civilians, including children, earlier this week.
Using a deadly nerve agent, Assad choked out the lives of helpless men, women, and children.
The days of being able to act with impunity are over when it comes to Bashar al-Assad.
Russian President Vladimir Putin called the airstrikes an act of aggression and a blow to U.S.-Russia relations. Russia has repeatedly backed Assad and reportedly had military personnel at that targeted base that was hit. They had reportedly left, though, beforehand. Indiana lawmakers on Friday reacted to the news. Democratic Senator Joe Donnelly calling the action appropriate, but said he wants to hear from the president now about what the long-term plan is. Meanwhile, Congresswoman Susan Brooks posted this to Twitter. The Republican saying the Assad regime's use of chemical weapons against its own people is despicable. The president is right to respond decisively. We can no longer turn our backs on Assad's continued abuse of the Syrian people. He must be removed from power. And Republican Congressman Jim Banks saying President Trump has sent a clear message that the use of chemical weapons is unacceptable and has consequences. At this critical moment, it is vital that the United States has a comprehensive strategy that addresses the situation in Syria. Part of this strategy should include Congress passing a new AUMF, which means authorized use of military force. Former Democratic vice presidential candidate Senator Tim Kaine with a much different take.
There is no legal justification for this. I think from a moral standpoint, absolutely, I agree with Senator Rubio. It was the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do to try to deter Bashar al-Assad from war crimes. And remember, I voted to use military action against Syria in August of 2013. But I said the president has to come to Congress. And Donald J. Trump, Citizen Trump at that time, said exactly the same thing. A president has to go to Congress. So President Trump's doing this, finally waking up to the atrocities in Syria, is a good thing, but he should not have done this without coming to Congress.
Our political insiders debate the U.S. military strike in Syria. Was it necessary? Their answer coming up in just a few minutes right here. The other big news from Washington this week, of course, on Friday, the Senate confirmed Neil Gorsuch as the next justice of the Supreme Court. He, of course, replaces Antonin Scalia, who died last year. The confirmation vote there, 54-45. It came months after Republicans blocked President Obama's selection, Judge Merrick Garland, and refused to bring the judge up for a vote. Many Republicans didn't even meet with them. Justice Gorsuch will now serve on the highest court, and at just 49 years old, could serve for the next 3 decades or more. The vote, of course, left the Senate potentially forever changed. When it became clear that Republicans couldn't get 60 votes to break a Democratic filibuster, they backed the nuclear option. The rules were changed to confirm Supreme Court nominees, eliminating that 60-vote minimum to end a filibuster. Some Democrats call this a crime against the Constitution. And Senator Bernie Sanders said on Thursday this could lead to more problems down the road.
I think what Mitch McConnell did today is wrong, and it portends, I think, very contentious days coming into the future.
Republicans will argue that Democrats went nuclear back in 2013, but Democrats say they only changed the rules for lower courts, and the Supreme Court should be held to a higher standard. Both U.S. Senators from Indiana, Todd Young and Joe Donnelly, voted to confirm Justice Gorsuch. Republican Senator Todd Young had backed him since the two met weeks ago to discuss the then judge's judicial philosophy.
He cited his mentors. Justice White was certainly one of his heroes, and Justice Scalia made a great impression on him in terms of how he decides cases. And perhaps most importantly, from my standpoint, he understands the job of a judge is not to write laws, but instead to interpret them and apply them to the facts of any given case.
Meanwhile, Democratic Senator Joe Donnelly spoke to us earlier this week with a less enthusiastic backing, though he gave Gorsuch his support.
When you look at it, you have to look in a spectrum of Do I agree with 100% of his decisions? I don't agree with 100% of anyone's decisions, and so there are decisions that do concern me, but overall, he is qualified.
Senator Donnelly was one of 3 Senate Democrats to support Gorsuch. From Capitol Hill now to the Circle City, and 2 major development plans just getting off the ground this week. One could bring a World Trade Center here to Indianapolis. The other would make some major changes to Indianapolis's riverfront. A World Trade Center, of course, is a symbol of international trade, now found in more than 300 cities all across the world. One World Trade Center in New York City is likely the best known of the buildings, but Indianapolis has now taken a very big step towards getting the World Trade Center Indianapolis. The WTC approved Indy's bid to this point, the CEO calling it impressive. Down the road, that could mean a new high-rise downtown with a hotel and convention space. I caught up with the WTC Indianapolis president, Doris Ann Sadler, this week.
Constantly talking about with companies in India, China, even Gibraltar this past week has some interest in some things that we manufacture here in Indiana. And it's not just goods, it's also technology. That's the new area to go. So we think it's going to have a major impact on the bottom line for businesses here in Indiana.
And when it comes to technology, we know the Circle City right now is booming.
The Silicon Valley. They're going to have to start calling it the Hoosier Valley.
As for where this all goes from here, a finalized application will likely be ready and submitted within the next 6 months or so. And local leaders are also thinking about transforming a stretch of Indy's riverfront. We're talking about some possible big-time improvements there, retail, restaurants, residential. It could end up looking a lot more like this. I spoke with city leaders to get a look at what could be coming. A promotional video from Wilmington, North Carolina could give Hoosiers a glimpse of what the White River's riverfront downtown could one day look like.
This Riverwalk, this linear park, is so attractive. You just want to go there.
City County Councilor Vop Osili just joined several others from Indy to see Wilmington's Riverwalk firsthand. They're set to review other cities as well, specifically Des Moines, Iowa, and Columbus, Ohio, cities which have overcome similar challenges to what Indy faces, including low dams preventing most boats from using the river. And then there's the water quality itself.
Our combined sewer overflow issues will have been addressed by 2025. So we've got at least probably a 7 to 8 year horizon before we could do too much on that riverfront.
It's of course important to note that this is very early in the process, but still it's a sign that the city is looking to improve one of its biggest resources and attractions in town, both for those who live here and of course everyone coming in from out of town.
In order for us to be competitive and also just enhance, I think, the fun and the quality of life, we've got to activate that river.
Getting to that point might seem like a bit of an upriver challenge, but if those other cities can do it, surely the Circle City can too.
What's the benchmark that we could look at? And what are the lessons that they learned? And what do we take from that? And can we step up and occupy that #1 spot in good time?
Shifting gears, a debate captivating Indiana. Should gas stations be allowed to sell cold beer? Rickers found a legal loophole, but lawmakers are fighting to oppose it. The owner of Rickers is here in studio to give his take on all of it. We'll chat with him next on Indianapolis This Week, only on RTVC.
Only at the Royal Gallery of Rugs.
And welcome back. A major debate at the State House rages on. How long will Rickers be able to sell cold beer? There's no consensus yet if lawmakers will close a legal way right now to allow Rickers to sell cold beer at 2 gas stations. Lawmakers face an end-of-session deadline in 2 weeks now. It's all opened up a broader discussion again about the state's alcohol laws as a whole. Both the House and Senate agree they need to review and modernize them some way. The Senate president says state lawmakers will need to agree on offensive sorts to build around the current laws in the near term. He says that will likely include letting Rickers continue to sell cold beer at 2 of its locations through the remainder of its permit, with 9 months left to go. And joining me right now, the owner of Rickers, of course, Jay Ricker. Jay, good to see you.
Thanks for having me on.
Is the food truck around? Did you bring anything here for us today?
We didn't bring the food truck, although we did bring it earlier in the week for the legislature.
Yes, you did. Talk about that in your efforts to kind of move this forward.
So, this has kind of turned into a huge case. So, consumers in this country today want to have fresh, homemade food, variety. We came up with the Tex-Mex. We tried it out downtown on a food truck for a year and a half, rolled it out to our stores. We had people saying, gosh, I'd like to have a cold beer. We have a big sit-down area, and so we found out through our attorneys who get our licenses that we actually would fall into the category that could have a license. That allows us to sell cold beer on premises and carry out cold beer. We started doing that a day and a half afterwards. I think the hospitals were full of all the people that own liquor stores because I think they all stroked out, because they all went immediately to the legislative bodies and to the leaders and said, you know, this is not right. And then the word, and I rarely use this in an interview, came out, loophole. Well, the governor finally weighed in and said, no, it was not a loophole. We followed the law. It took us like 90 days to get a license. We had local hearings, and the ATC had to weigh in. You have certain things that you have to do. We had our clerks trained. So it wasn't just a quick thing that we did. Then we've got the legislature trying to change things. I actually testified both the House and the Senate. Especially in the House, they came up with an amendment recently, sponsored by somebody on each side of the aisle, actually the representative from Sheridan, where we have one of those stores, that would have us holding no more licenses. This license we had is kind of a different one. We had spirits. We said we'd remove the spirits, and they needed to have a summer study. That bill, I'm told, in caucus with the Republicans in the House had overwhelming support, and they were to have a floor vote on it the next day. The next day, the chairman, Smaltz, withdrew it, and they couldn't vote.
However this ends up in the end of all of this, is this the first domino to fall to changing Indiana's alcohol laws down the road, do you think?
Well, it certainly has started a conversation.
Yes, it has.
But the liquor lobby has done everything in its power to stifle the conversation, to try and hold us responsible, and they've pushed every button. I'm told the reason they didn't have a hearing on the bill was that the liquor lobby just had a fit. And Chairman Smaltz had indicated to members of his committee the day before he was personally opposed to it, but they would get to vote on it. That's stopped. So the Senate side had one which was more restrictive, and I think will cause a lot of restaurants unintended consequences. It's got a high percentage of sales you have to have on liquor inside your store, and if you don't, you're going to lose the ability to sell cold beer. Again, the liquor lobby wants that. They don't want anybody else to sell cold beer but themselves.
We will see what happens. Jay Ricker, we appreciate your time. Good luck with the Tex-Mex, too.
Thank you.
We're open for samples.
Okay.
Thanks, Jay. From the State House to the White House and Capitol Hill, of course, a historic week indeed. Our political insider standing by to put it all into context for us. That's next on Indianapolis This Week.
Much better.
On ABC.
And welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. We are joined by our political insiders, Kip Two for the Democrats and Pete Seat for the Republicans right now. And let's first talk about the airstrikes launched on Thursday against Syria. Pete, your take, the appropriate response?
Absolutely. I think we saw a decisive commander-in-chief. A lot of people were saying that a test would come for Donald Trump in his first 100 days, and we certainly got it with this despicable act in Syria, and he acted decisively and showed leadership, something, unfortunately, your former boss did not show when he drew that red line and then time and time again refused to live up to it.
Kip, I don't even need to ask you a question. You can just keep rolling.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is he drew the red line, and there was no more gas attacks until this president took office. This president took office, sent the signals to Syria that they were going to look the other way. He was styling up to Putin. Putin and Assad are buddies. I think the Assad thought he could get away with it. And there was Trump's response. I'm not sure that it wasn't an appropriate response, but it remains to be seen. I don't think that there's a long-term strategy certainly here, and that's what's more important. Anytime you send bombs into the Middle East, there's a lot of unintended consequences, and so this thing is yet to be played out.
Senator Donnelly calling it an appropriate response, but said he wants to see that plan. Do you think that there is a plan, and where do they go from here?
Well, I think they're going to have to draw one up. The good news is President Trump has a very good national security team around him. John McCain was on Morning Joe, I believe, Friday morning, saying just that it's one of the best national security teams, if not the best national security team he's ever seen, which is high praise coming from John McCain.
Well, this is John McCain who wanted us to go into Iraq. This is the same John McCain who wants to fight battles at every opportunity, and I think the American people are very worried about where this goes. We were embroiled in Iraq for a decade. We're still sort of there. Afghanistan's not completely over with. I mean, it is not an easy thing to say we're going to go in here and just bomb these guys and have no consequences. And I think, you know, it's not an easy thing to say. I'm sure the national security team is excellent, but that doesn't mean that they have the political implications down.
Let's go from Syria now to the Supreme Court. Justice Neil Gorsuch confirmed on Friday. Pete, the nuclear option took effect this week. What does this mean long-term for the Senate?
Well, they absolutely had no choice. Let's not forget that the nuclear option was started by Chuck Schumer, Harry Reid, and that crew when they were trying to get lower court judges through. And they had no choice. Mitch McConnell and Republicans had absolutely no choice but to do this. Neil Gorsuch is a qualified, strong individual. He will be a wonderful Supreme Court justice. He was confirmed, let's not forget, by voice vote. Not a single person voted against him when he was confirmed to a lower court not that long ago. There are some senators who are still there today who'd voted for him back then.
3 Democrats, including Senator Donnelly, backing Gorsuch on Friday.
Yeah, I think that I couldn't disagree with everything he said any more than what he said right there. During the Obama's term, there were more filibusters of lower courts than any time in history. In fact, I think almost as many as the entire history of the country combined when we got to Obama. And so the Democrats, when they changed the option for the lower courts, did it in response to what the Republicans had done to stop everything Obama had done. And I think the American people ignore all this. And I think the bottom line, or where is Gorsuch's decision going to come down? And I think Joe Donnelly's going to regret having voted for Neil Gorsuch, because Neil Gorsuch doesn't represent anything Democratic Party values represent, and he's going to show it throughout his history in the United States Supreme Court.
We didn't get a filibuster on the Senate floor, but Kip took our time. Well done, Kip. Kip, Pete, thank you for joining us. We heard from Pete and Kip. Now it's time for I Say, You Say, our commentary segment that features a different guest here each and every week. Today, you heard him on the radio for years here in Indy, and now he's a tech writer for Cydia. Let's hear from Ed Wenk.
Recently, U.S. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin told the news organization Axios that he wasn't at all concerned about artificial intelligence replacing human jobs. He said, and I quote, "That's not even on our radar screens. It's 50 to 100 years away." Well, with all due respect, Mr. Secretary, I think your radar might be malfunctioning. The prevailing wisdom in the tech universe is that your numbers may be off by decades. PricewaterhouseCoopers estimates that 38% of U.S. jobs could be affected by automation by 2030. Here's a couple more stats for you, courtesy of some futurists I know. Right now, we're adding 100 things to the internet every second. We're uploading more data every 10 minutes than has been amassed in all of human history up to this point. In fact, we're approaching the end of code. In other words, we soon won't be programming machines, we'll be teaching them. This kind of deep neural learning is going to be as great a disruptor as anything we can imagine. Both blue-collar and white-collar jobs are going to be affected, and we're not really sure how quite yet. This may require our society to confront very difficult questions about employment, about training, about the very definition of what we call work. All of this has the potential to change our society in fundamental ways that we've only begun to imagine. When economists and futurists begin using terms like guaranteed universal income, you can be sure that the impact of AI is dead ahead, whether it's on anyone's radar screen or not. I'm Ed Wenk, and that's what I say.
Thank you, Ed, and we want to know what you've got to say about anything in Indy this week. Reach out to us on Twitter, our Facebook page, the app, or online. Lauren Casey standing by to get us geared up for the week ahead. The 6 next on Indy.
10 on RTV 6.
Hope you're having a fantastic Sunday. Storm Team 6 meteorologist Kyle Mounts here with you. Temperatures certainly fantastic, warming into the middle 70s this afternoon. We'll come with a breezy southwest wind at 35 miles per hour, some of those gusts, but at least we're going to be nice and mild here, well above average, and we'll keep it dry. Overnight, temperatures going to stay mild as well. 60 degrees for an overnight temperature in Lafayette, 57 in the city, and 58 degrees in Columbus. As we look at your Monday, could have a few morning showers showers around. Temperatures are going to stay mild as you head back to work. Highs in the mid-70s, and we'll find chance for showers, maybe even a few thunderstorms heading on into our Monday evening. There's a slight risk northwest of a Crawfordsville to Kokomo line that some of those storms could have some gusty winds. Monday evening, something we'll continue to watch for you. 7-day planning forecast shows temperatures that get tempered just a little bit behind that weather system, but highs still in the 60s and lower 70s the next 7 days.
Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. I'm Lauren Casey. It's time for the 6, so let's take a look at 6 things happening right here in Indy. Great news if you hate pushing your cart through the crowds at grocery stores. Starting on Thursday, you can have your Meijer orders delivered right to your doorstep. That's the first day this service will be available right here in Indianapolis. You will have to pay for a membership to use this option. Well, come on out to Bankers Life Fieldhouse one more time this season to cheer on your Pacers at their last season home game. They take on the Atlanta Hawks on Wednesday. Tip time for that game is set for 8 o'clock. IMS is gearing up to honor a racing legend. A new exhibit honoring A.J. Foyt will open at the Speedway on Friday to commemorate the 40th anniversary of his record-setting 4th Indy 500 victory. That exhibit will run through the end of October. Well, this weekend you can see the Easter story in a whole new way. Back by popular demand, Gregory Hancock Dance Theater will bring their performance of Superhero, the story of a man called Jesus, to the Center of Performing Arts in Carmel. Tickets are just under $40 at the door. And we all know this weekend will be full of Easter egg hunts all across our communities. Kids, get ready for the Easter egg extravaganza that's on the south side. IMPD and Hubler Chevrolet are teaming up for this family fun event on Saturday. Those activities kick off at 1 p.m. And the yearly presidential egg roll takes over the Benjamin Harrison home downtown on Saturday. Come on out for crafts, music, and of course the race. Also this weekend you may see a whole cast of characters walking around downtown. That's because Comic-Con is returning this week to the convention center. Tickets for that are just $30 and kids under 12 can go for free. That's what's happening this week. Jason, back to you.
Lauren, thank you so much, and thank you for joining us here on Indianapolis This Week. We will continue to follow the latest developments from Washington and the White House, and of course the State House with just 2 weeks to go. Join us each night right here on RTV6. For Raphael, Katie, Lauren, and our entire team, have a fantastic Sunday, everybody.